Sairam, Ajoy, thank you very much. And it's my great honor to be able to speak to you about my experiences with Swami. Dearest loving Lord, you are my heart, my soul, my love, and my life. You are my guard and my guide. I have to say, watching some of the video was really amazing. The darshan video in the beginning with young Swami and walking around the veranda was quite amazing. So I enjoyed that very much. Again, just thank you very much for having me, for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be here speaking with you all. So I thought I would begin the story with begin my talk with a little story about my mother, since we're talking about mothers, and ultimately who is our mother, who shines forth through our mothers as that very love from the mother is Swami himself. It always was him, and it will always be. He takes the form of our mothers and fathers, our friends, our co-workers, everyone that we know. He takes those forms in order to move us along the path, and so we're very fortunate. I was extremely fortunate. I have had one of the most wonderful mothers that brought me to God. What else can a son hope for than to have faith and love in God, which I believe she raised me with. I remember a funny story about my mother, which will make you laugh a little bit. So when she was getting ready to go to India, she had a friend of hers that said, you have to be careful where you go and what you eat in India, because your stomach isn't quite ready for the food yet. And so you have to be careful, just, make sure that the water's, has a cap on the top, and you're very careful when you go see Swami, including, if you go somewhere, just, you have to make sure that the ghee is good, because if the ghee has been reused, sometimes that'll make you sick, and just be a little bit careful where you end up. And so she went to see Swami, and this was in 1976, actually 78 also. She was there. She was there for 78 summer course, which is got a beautiful picture with her there. But she gets into the interview room with Swami. Swami calls her in, and there's many things that are said, and I could talk about that, but this story in particular is funny, because at one point he had someone come over and he said, "Give me your hands like this." And he started to turn his hand just like I'm turning it now. And out of it came a beautiful smelling, amazing porridge. I wish I could remember the actual name of the porridge, but a beautiful smelling, fragrant, hot porridge out of Swami's hand, just right out like this. And it comes in a mound on this person's hands. And then he says, "Now pass it out, and give a little bit to each person, have them take some." And he looks at my mom and he says, "And don't worry, the ghee is good." So there's a little example that I love to think about in terms of Swami's omniscience, omnipresence, and also in some ways his motherly love. So, I just want to go back to this idea that, this creation that we're involved in is an example of Swami's form, and how everything is happening now for our own good. And so as with the people that we meet, our parents, our mothers and fathers, and in this particular time of year, we think of the mother's love from God, how sweet it is, how caring. There's really nothing that we're exposed to in this world that is greater than a mother's love. And really, I just want us to think about it in terms of that is Swami's chance through our parents. He takes their form and he raises us, and he gives us exactly what we need in life. And through that, the mother, nurtures us, cares for us, looks after us. And all of those are the attributes in a very small way of what Swami really is. He's said it before, he's the love of 1,000 mothers. And so, what I thought I would go through a little bit in this in this 30 minutes is, what have I learned from my mother? And when I say my mother, I use mother with a capital M. What have I learned from Swami? What have I learned through my mother, who taught me with Swami's love? And I would just say that the first thing that comes to mind when we talk about Swami's teachings, to me, are thoughts. All of our thoughts turn into action. This is one of those things that maybe if there's time, I'll tell of an interview that I had with Swami, in which he looked at me and he said, bad thoughts turn into action. No more bad thoughts. Our whole destiny, our character, as we know from SSE, everything is contained moment to moment in what we think about, what we dwell on, and of course, what creates our thoughts other than the food that we take in. And I don't want to get technical about it, but I do want to say that if we watch what we eat, watch what we watch what we listen to, because that's food also, and watch what we eat. If we can eat sattvic, watch sattvic, pure things, then our thoughts will slowly become more and more attracted to God. And as that starts to happen, of course, our lives change. And so I would just say, take a moment to take stock in what you're doing with your time, as far as your the food that you're taking in, and how this is affecting your thoughts. This has been a profound impact on my life, is that I have the ability in every moment to think about my thoughts, to watch them, to make sure that they're in the right lane of thinking. The other thing I would say is that because of this, I think that everything is happening for our higher good at all times. That's another thing that I've come out of being with Swami, that everything is his grace. If we're thinking of him, if we're in this frame of mind that everything that's happening to us, everything that we're experiencing around us, all of these things can be seen as if it is Swami's grace and what we can learn from it. And it has been a rare gift that Swami has given us, to tell us that everything is happening for our own good. A few other things that have really come to me in my life are that have been important to me, and that I think are worth speaking about today, is that he has a mission. His mission is to restore Dharma. His mission is to bring everyone to him. And in this mission, he has an organization that is doing this. All are working for Swami. Catholics, Hindus, Muslims, all are devotees. But I would just say that we have a rare opportunity to serve in his organization, to give everything of ourselves for this mission. Service to man, service to the devotees. I've been extraordinarily fortunate and blessed in my life to be around such wonderful, all of the devotees that I've known in my life, that I have tried to serve as if they are Swami himself. These are the things that have made a tremendous impact in my life. There is nothing greater than being with the devotees of the Lord, talking about him. And so if you get an opportunity to serve in this organization as an officer, working on a service project, take full advantage that this is a rare gift, a gift that you can finally give to back something to Swami for everything that he's always given us. And of course, I think that, Swami has always talked about repeating the name of God, seeing him in others, serving them as if they are Swami himself. Those are the things that have always made a very large impact on me. And I would say, without a doubt, my most favorite wonderful thing that I love to do is listen to stories about Krishna, about Rama, about Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba, about Shirdi, any of the avatars of God, about Jesus, anything that is sweet and compassionate and twists your heart with some fascinating aspect of faith and love, is always been a great thing to me. And I'll go back to this idea of in the beginning of what Swami said to me. He said, thoughts turn into action. And I think since many of you have not heard me speak, is my hope, I'll tell you a little bit about my personal experiences with Swami also. And so one of the things that I like to talk about, because it brings me such great joy, is a chance that I had when I was back in 1995, was my first trip to see Swami. At that point, I was about 27, I think, in 1995. And it was my first chance, my first time to go see Swami. And at that point, I was involved in the Sai Center. I was serving as like a devotional coordinator in the Ventura Sai Center. And I was just thrilled to go. And my mother, who I'll bring it back around to my mother, she had been pining after me going to see Swami. And so finally in December of 1995, just after I'd been married, my wife and I took a trip to Bangalore. And my mother met us there in the airport, and we took a taxi, which I thought was a magical adventure to come from Southern California and go to Bangalore and drive through the beautiful, beautiful parts of India into the country, and then finally over to Swami's ashram in Puttaparthi. And the very first time that I saw him, I was seated by a Sevadal. I sat behind a very tall German man who was about 6'10", and I was one of the first people into the Mandir area. And I didn't know where to sit, so I sat behind this extremely tall man, and the Sevadal came over and he helped me. He moved me to another position. And all I can tell you is I remember as Swami, when he came out, I just started to sob with devotion. And as he got closer, I actually covered my face because it was so ugly with tears and everything else happening on my face. And I covered my face and I looked up, and he looked at me and my vision changed, and all I could see were his eyes and this wait. And so it was quite powerful. And then a couple days later, it's a long story, but I'll try to make it brief because we don't have too much time. But I could see around the third or fourth day I was there, I could see off in the distance, I could see Swami, and he would walk along and look up at me, and then walk along and look up at me. And I said, oh my gosh, Swami, could this be the day that I get to go to an interview with you and be close to you? And I knew that that's what was going to happen. And as he came close, I got on my knees, and I was just inches from his face. And I said, Swami, interview. And he said, wait. And I sat down, and on the top of my head, he just tapped me on the top of the head. And I said, I can wait, Swami, to myself. And he looked back and he said, how many? And I said, 3. And he said, go. And I just knew that this would be the greatest moment of my life, to be with him. And so it was my mother and my wife and I, we went into the interview room, and we went and sat, and Swami talked to us about the Hridaya, the compassionate heart of Jesus, for quite a while. And then he called us into the interview room, into the little room, and many things happened. I could talk for an hour just on this particular time with Swami, but he brought us into the small interview room. There's an outer interview room, and then there's an inner interview room. And my mother immediately sat in front of Swami's chair, and my wife sat right in front of Swami's chair. And I thought to myself, well, I think it's rude. I think it's rude to sit before Swami sits, almost like a cordial politeness. I don't know why I thought this. So I went to the corner of the room, and Swami came in, and he looked over at me, and he walked over. And as he was walking, there were pillows, and he pretended to stumble. And as he came towards me, I held him by the arm. And we walked back to the door, and he held my hand very tightly. And then he closed the door and latched the door, never let go of my hand. And then we came over to the chair where he has a small chair that was lower, never letting go of my hand. He fell back into the chair and took me with him. And my legs went under the chair, under by him, and I was way up as close as I'm to the screen, which is about that far away from his face. And he had never let go of my hand. And then he leaned back and he put his foot on my leg. So he just sort of put his foot on my leg, and I couldn't believe what was happening. I was in absolute literal shock of what was happening. And he was holding my hand, and then he looked at me very closely and he went, "Good boy, good boy." And then he leaned back a little bit, and then he came forward and he said, "Good boy, good boy." He pinched my cheek. And this is when he said, thoughts turn into action. You have bad thoughts turn into action. And so this has been something that I have watched my entire life, is to keep my eyes on my thoughts, my inner vision, and to make sure to always bring my thoughts back to the center, always bringing them back to the center. And this has made a big impact on me. And he continued to hold my hand and pinch my cheek, and he said a few other things. And then he said, "Hurry." Another lesson that I learned from him was hurry. You drive too fast, he said. He said, hurry is worry. So no more hurry. And of course, this relates in many ways to a spiritual thing that Swami will talk about, hurry. It's not necessarily hurry, worry, and curry in terms of our physical lives, although many of us will look at that and say that's important. But it's more from a spiritual standpoint of steady and slow wins the race. Every day, work on your devotion, work on what your sadhana is. Give it practice every day. And in the end, you're surely to win, as Swami says. And so for me, this has been a great lesson of never give up, always keep serving him. For me, it's been my work for the devotees and in various different ways. That's been one of the largest aspects of my spiritual life. And it has brought me always the best of joy. I never wanted any position in Swami's organization. I couldn't believe, in fact, when I was asked at each time, and I've been a young adult, I've been in various different things, and every time I felt like I couldn't do it. It was too much. I didn't have the ability. I didn't have the time. I didn't have the energy or even the intelligence to do his work. I'm reminded always of the fact that he is the one giving all of those things. And I dive headlong in, and I do everything I possibly can to serve in this organization and in this mission. And finally, we were there with him, and Swami looks down at me and he says, he starts, well, I'll tell a story and then I'll come back. So a couple of years before I went to see Swami, I was driving on a windy mountain road and with many curves, and singing bhajans or something, doing some, I've probably felt more devotion in my life just driving alone, singing bhajans in some cases than I ever have in my entire life. Sometimes tears rolling down my cheeks. And so here I am, I'm driving on this windy road. And just as I have this person come, just as I round this corner, I see a large truck on the inside of the lane coming, and I'm on the outside of the lane coming. And I look under the tires and I can see that the person it's a truck that has two big cargo bays with a a structure in the middle so that it can move around corners. And so I thought I saw immediately it was going to hit the mountain. And if it hit the mountain, then it would pop into my lane as I was on the outside. All of this happened in a flash. And so I immediately, instead of going around the mountain, I went straight off on a area that you could pull off on. And as I was pulling off, I looked back and I could see the bottom of the tires of the second trailer. It had hit the mountain and bounced way in the air. And I was looking at the trailer. Additionally, as I was passing, I look down, I see that it's too close. I look up at the driver and the driver is bouncing. You know how those trucks bounce, and he's turning his wheel looking down at me. And then I veered off. I looked back and I could see that the trailer was 15 feet in the air. It would have crushed my car. And so now back to the interview. And Swami says, "Oh, remember those 2 times I saved you?" And this is what he does as he looks down at me. Now, I had never told anyone this particular aspect of that incident. I'd only told a few people that I knew, and I after it happened, I prayed and prayed, "Thank you, Swami, thank you, Swami." And who would have known this detail, to have the same look on their face as the driver as he's turning around that corner? It was a remarkable moment. And I looked at my mom and my wife and I said, "See, I told you he saved me." And it was a thrilling moment, to say the least. And then he leaned down and he said to me, "Hug, hug." And I was close, and he came down and he pulled me up and hugged me under my arms. And I had my arms around his back. And I laid my head on his shoulder, and he was rubbing my back, and it was a hug. And I could remember now, this is 1995, I remember thinking to myself immediately, "Oh my gosh, Swami, you have such a strong back. You're in such great shape." I can't even think of how old he would have been. 26, he would have been 70 almost at that point. But he was very physically fit. And I'll tell you, since there's a few of us here tonight, I'll just say that in that moment, I thought, I'd like to kiss Swami on the neck. I'd like to kiss Swami on the neck. He's my father. I want to just give him a tender, loving, fatherly kiss on the neck. And immediately when I had that thought, just before I had the thought, as I was having the thought, Swami backed away from the hug. And that was the end of the hug. And at that point, I looked down and I saw that my mother, who was on his left side, I was on the right and my wife was in the middle. I saw that my mother now was holding Swami's hand. And I hadn't had the thought yet. I still hadn't gone back, and I was holding his foot on my leg. And I thought, "Oh, I would like to hold his hand." And just as I thought that, he turned and offered me his hand. But I have to say, it was before the thought, just as I was having the thought. So who could be your own thoughts, other than Swami? And so, we came out of that interview. The last thing that happened that really struck me was we came out of the interview room. We were with the larger group, and Swami had turned a 3-ring diamond ring into a 1 ring by going, but he blew on it, and there was just 1 ring, 1 diamond. And immediately after that, it was kind of surprising to me. Everybody basically started to look for things for Swami to turn into something else. And I thought, that's so strange. And I kept just saying, "I'm never taking my eyes off of you, Swami." And as everyone turned away, I remember in that moment, my peripheral vision, everyone at the same moment turned away from Swami. And I seemed to be, in this room of 25 people, the only one looking at Swami. And he looked at me very sweetly and he said, "And what do you want, sir?" And I think this is the question that I'll end on, which is, what do you want? We have a finite time of life that we live here on this planet. We have choices with our thoughts of what we decide we're going to do. I want to spend every chance I get serving Swami. I want to dedicate my life to him. I want to do everything for him. Because there will be a moment when we will not have that chance. Live each day to the fullest, give everything you possibly can, love him till it hurts as much as you possibly can. And what can go wrong? His grace will save us from everything. And I'll say one thing that always inspired me, when I think it was Subhama and another lady who the mothers who took care of him, the village wanted to get rid of Swami. They weren't sure what Swami was. And this is when Subhama and the other mother went to the city to basically put the ashram, the first ashram, in his name and have an actual place for Swami. And they went, and he stayed outside of Puttaparthi. He stayed on the hills until they came back, and they fell at his feet, and they said that they had arranged for the land and the ashram. And he looked at them and he said, "I will protect you forever." And so we are blessed to have Swami in our lives. It has been my absolute pleasure and honor to speak to you all tonight. And thank you so much, Swami, for this chance to talk about you. And on this Navaratri night, this holy night, in which we can remember our mothers and the love that is in back of everything that we experience, Bhagavan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Thank you very much, Sai Ram.